Hello everyone, welcome back to UPSC Warriors channel. This is Soundarya. So now we are going to discuss about India's Semiconductor Mission. So this is a part 3 of the case study that we were discussing from the last week. And why do we have to study this? It is because the government is focusing so much on building the semiconductor ecosystem in the country. It is so with the rest of the countries also, because each and every country now we can see finding a place for themselves in the global supply chain. The reason being, this particular semiconductor is in huge demand globally. So now let's explore the possibilities for India in achieving a place for itself and in meeting the target that it has, that is by 2029 India wants to become the global semiconductor powerhouse of the world and find a place for itself in the top 5 countries that have powerful semiconductor ecosystem. So let's explore the possibilities, the challenges that we have, and of course the significance that we have in achieving this particular mission. Okay, so now we will start this session by finding out what is meant by semiconductor. So what is a semiconductor? It is basically the backbone of virtually all the electronic devices powering everything from your laptop, mobile, household appliances and automobiles. So this is something we know, right? So that is the significance of the semiconductor. So without semiconductor, remember, you cannot use your gadgets, right? And now I think you would have been able to understand why this semiconductor is in demand. We can see a number of gadgets coming up every day, and we as an individual use at least 3 to 4 gadgets, right? Fine. So this is something which is going to be a very important component in the electronics manufacturing sector, and it finds its application from electronics to industrial automation, telecommunications, and even in the healthcare. So this is about the semiconductor, and this particular demand or need of the semiconductor was felt so much, especially during the COVID-19 time period, where the supply, actually when the global supply chain of semiconductors got disrupted. So that is when the countries started to reassess their strategies for semiconductor ecosystem. So what is mean by semiconductor ecosystem? So when I say semiconductor ecosystem, it includes everything starting from the design and development to manufacturing and packaging and testing. So these are the essential elements of any semiconductor manufacturing and the ecosystem. So what is these things? See, design and development, you know that we have to actually come up with designs for creating the semiconductors or the chips, right? Again, that is going to be very, very difficult because it is not that easy and it is relied upon a huge amount of research and innovation. So this is something which is not that easy, okay, because already we have the top end semiconductors functioning or the chips functioning, right? So if at all we want to make something even more better, that again needs lot of research, lot of development and lot of investments. So I mean to say each and every stage, each and every element involved in the semiconductor ecosystem is highly challenging, and that is why we do not have that much amount of supply to meet the demand that is there right now in the world. So countries are, finding place for themselves in the global value chain. So talking about manufacturing, we know that manufacturing means producing, right? So in manufacturing units, what we basically do, we produce semiconductors, right? So that is called as a fabrication unit, and setting up a fabrication unit is again not so easy. It takes around 10 billion to 20 billion dollars for setting up of a single fabrication unit, okay? And then you know about packaging and testing. So when we say semiconductor ecosystem, it involves all the three. So we have to create facilities for establishing all these elements in the semiconductor ecosystem. So that is something India is trying to do. India is trying to build an overall semiconductor ecosystem in the country so as to catalyze its rapidly expanding electronics manufacturing and innovation system. So this is again something that is going to boost both the domestic sector as well as help India find a place in the global value chain, right? Okay, moving on to the next. Now we will see who are all the players, taking part in this particular semiconductor ecosystem. See, as I already told you that this is something quite challenging and it needs a lot of resources, and that is the reason we find only a cluster of companies dominating in this particular sector. So we can find hardly few companies who are actually involved in this. And if you see the region, so we have China, okay, so which is doing a good work with respect to this. We have Taiwan, we have Japan, okay, we have Singapore. Again, Singapore is a very important region, important place where this particular thing is happening. Why? Because it holds about 10% of global semiconductor chips is only from semiconductor. I mean, it's only from Singapore. Okay, and Singapore is also able to produce about 20% of semiconductor manufacturing raw materials in the world. So that is the level of significance that this particular country has. Okay, and then we have North America, Europe. So these are the handful of companies. You can see some of the companies written over here: Samsung, Intel, Broadcom. Okay, so these are the only companies who are actually dominating in this particular field, and that is why, with significant amount of skilled laborers in India who are actually good at making these semiconductors, we say them as semiconductor manufacturing engineers, right? About 20% of the semiconductor manufacturing engineers in the world are from India, and we have huge amount of domestic demand for that. And since this particular product is having a global demand, we are focusing so much on this particular sector so as to find a place for ourselves in the international market. Clear? The reason being, the competitors are less and dominated by a cluster of companies. Since India has some potential, we are trying to focus on this. Let's explore that one by one now. So before moving on to that, just look at some of the challenges we have to tackle even before thinking of something doing great, right? So what are the challenges associated with this? As I already told you, it is going to take years and years for research and development. Again, that is going to cost you much. Talking about the fabrication units, as I already mentioned, it is again very costly, and accessing chip making machinery is again a challenge. Even developing technology is a challenge. Getting access to that developed technology is again a challenge. So how India is going to overcome these challenges? So India has made some progresses and some initiatives so as to overcome these challenges and find a place for itself. Say for example, it's working on building collaborations between different countries for gaining access to technologies. One such example could be the relationship which India has with Singapore. It is having collaboration on this front, and India is also a eighth member of this US CHIPS initiative. Clear? So by means of which India is able to get technological access as well as investments. So let's see these things one by one. So because of having high cost of fabrication units, India has come up with some schemes where the government is actually going to fund the projects for, fund the companies, those who are willing to set up their manufacturing plants in India. So let's see it in more detail. Okay, so before we begin, let's understand why the demand for this particular semiconductor is very high in recent times. It is because the number of people who are using the gadgets is high, the number of different gadgets that are coming up is high. And how about the supply? The demand is increasing, but the supply is not increasing to meet the demand. The reason being, we have problems related to manufacturing. We do not have that much chips in place that is produced to meet the demand, that is called as shortages. We have the geopolitical tensions. We can see countries fighting with each other, right? And we have limited manufacturing capacity. The units are very less, fabrication units are very less. So these are some of the reasons for leading to increased demand. So we call that as what? Supply chain challenges. We are not able to fulfill the supply demand. Okay, and then talking about the technological advancements, as I already told you, this needs huge amount of investments in research and development so as to develop the required technologies. Okay, so we have to focus more on research and development. We have to come up with energy efficient chips, and we have to also take care of this investments and collaborations. So this amount of technological advancements is not that up to the level, and it is not so same across all the countries, and that is why we have only clusters of companies involved in this particular semiconductor ecosystem, making the demand higher. Okay, and then talking about the talent acquisition, of course it needs skilled population, right? Because designing is something again that is dependent upon the skill. So largely it depends upon the amount of skilled population that we have. So when we have huge amount of skilled people who are involved in this, then we will be able to produce more to meet the supply. Otherwise the demand is going to remain high. Okay, So these are some of the points that you can write about when there is a question related to semiconductor ecosystem challenges in the country. Okay, so now how this particular semiconductor ecosystem is going to be built by India. Do you think India has a potential to do that? So please drop a message in the comment section. What is your opinion on this? And do you think we have to invest so much on this or not? Okay. Now, why India can do this? Because India has a huge amount of engineers, scientists, and the personals who are present in India, who can be utilized to produce this particular semiconductor chips, and that is something going to be going to provide India to have a comparative advantage over the other countries. As I already mentioned, we have around 20% of semiconductor manufacturing engineers from the entire world in India alone. Again, with that much amount of talent, why don't we go for producing semiconductor chips, right? So we have to just make use of them properly, just make use of their skills properly by having other infrastructures and investments in place. So this is one such reason for why India should go for this. And moving on to the next, there is a huge amount of domestic demand. We can see that the electronic manufacturing in India is rapidly expanding. So with that amount of electronic manufacturing sector getting expanded, although the demand is also getting boosted, right? So we already have the domestic demand. So if we are manufacturing this thing, it is going to boost the economy, domestic economy, in addition to finding a place for itself in the global market. And it is also going to reduce our import dependency for this particular products, because the costs are also being high, right? So in that case, this is again going to be a favor for India. And then talking about the strategic partnerships, India can do this because it is working on building strategic partnerships in this particular field where it is able to get the access to technology. As I told you, it is having relationship with Singapore and America in this regard, right? And it is also, I know India is also approving so many companies from abroad to operate and own the plants in India. So this is how India can make use of this particular atmosphere. And now we completed the potential, we completed the challenges, and now we are moving on to the significance of having this particular target achieved for India. Of course, it is going to lead to economic growth. Okay, so right now, if you see, the semiconductor market value in India is about $23.2 billion. Okay, so this market value is projected to increase to $80.3 billion by 2028. So just imagine, this is the projected value that is to be, that we will be able to achieve by 2028. So definitely it is going to boost the economic growth, because we have what? Domestic demand, and we are also importing this, right? So with that amount of electronic manufacturing getting expanded, with that amount of skilled population in the country, with collaborations with other nations for technological advancements, it is something which can yield improvement in the economic performance. And talking about the technological advancements, okay, so this is something which is going to make India to dwell more into the research field. Okay, and that will again make India to achieve a place in the world as a leader with cutting edge technologies, because the government is also funding the research and development related to the semiconductor ecosystem. And now, what are the other advantages for India? Definitely, it is going to lead to employment creation. It was estimated that about 20,000 of a direct employment and 60,000 of indirect employment is going to get created from this particular ecosystem alone. And again, it is going to help India in having a national security. Why? Because it is going to reduce the technological dependence of India and reducing the reliance of foreign countries as well. Okay, now, so what are the schemes that were launched by the India in this favor? So we have so many schemes in place, starting from India Semiconductor Mission to Production Linked Incentive Scheme, Design Linked Incentive Scheme, and Semicon India program. So these are some of the schemes that you can quote in your answers. And while writing that, you have to also know what it means, right? So let's explore now what are these schemes meant for and how it is going to help India achieve its target. So starting about India Semiconductor Mission, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, we have Semiconductor Fab Facility, we have skill development programs, and this is something which is aimed at increasing the population of skilled workforce in the country. although we have 20% of engineers who are able to manufacture semiconductors in India, it is only 5% of formal workforce that have skill in India. That is why India is coming up with so many skill development programs like National Skill Development Mission, and then we also have some skill security councils. Okay, we have so many skill development programs in India which is aimed at increasing the skilled population. So what we are doing in all these things? Okay, so now we will start with production linked incentive scheme. So as the name itself says, so it is going to give you incentives for production. Why we have to give incentives for production? It is to offset the disabilities that we have with respect to the manufacturing. Okay, so to offset means to nullify, to reduce the amount of disabilities in the domestic industry in semiconductor design. Okay, so it is also going to offer the financial incentive and design infrastructure for a period of 5 years. Okay, remember that it is for a period of 5 years, and it will boost the domestic manufacturing and attract large investments units from abroad in India. This is about production linked incentive scheme. Okay, and moving on to the next, this is very important. This is India's Semiconductor Mission. So this is something which was established as a business unit. Okay, so it is not just a mission. So it is established as an independent business division with the Digital India Cooperation. So what is the significance of being established as independent business division? It will have some autonomy with respect to financial decision makings. It will have some autonomy with respect to administrative decisions. Okay, so that is going to give it more power to do things in its arena, and it is going to build the semiconductor ecosystem, as I told you, to build the overall ecosystem starting from its design to manufacture, packaging, testing, etc. So India wants to focus more on assembly. Why? Because we do not have that much amount of manufacturing raw materials in India. That is why it is India wants to focus more on assembly stuff. Okay, and now under this particular semiconductor mission, we have three schemes in like place which are very, very significant. Starting with modified scheme for setting up of semiconductor fabrications. So it is going to give you some amount of incentives and funds for establishing the fabrication units in India. About 50% of the project cost will be funded by the government to the companies who wants to establish their fabrication units in India for manufacturing semiconductor chips, right? Okay, so and then modified scheme for setting up, this is display fabs. Okay, so here there is a mistake in the slide. This is again going to fund for manufacturing the displays, and then modified scheme for setting up of compound semiconductors. Here we include a whole range of things starting from raw materials to manufacturing, and then to designing, and then testing, application, everything. So everything will fall under this particular thing. So we are taking care of each and every element of the ecosystem in place under this India Semiconductor Mission. Okay, and then Semicon India Future Design. So it is a design linked incentive scheme. So where the incentives are given for design and infrastructure to promote domestic industries and foster innovation and growth. More or less all these schemes have similar advantages only. Fine. Okay. So we have again a number of schemes in place, right? Okay. So this is Semicon India program. It is for design and development of silicon chips and display manufacturing ecosystem. It is for the development of supply chain starting from raw materials, chemicals, gases, etc., which is again used in the manufacturing. So these are some of the schemes and initiatives we had. So now summing up, we started with saying that India is having an ambitious plan of becoming the global semiconductor powerhouse of the world by 2029, by means of which it is going to pave way for having a long-term strategy and a great presence in the global supply chain. So how it is able to do that? It is able to do with the help of resources that it has in the country, and it is also having the domestic demand in place. So if at all we are able to achieve that, in addition to finding a place in the global market level, we will be able to meet the domestic demand and catalyze the rapidly expanding electronic manufacturing innovation ecosystem in the country. So how it is going to be possible? Because we have enough amount of talent, resources in the country. We are making technological collaborations with the other countries in the world, and the government is also coming up, with incentive based production programs for taking care of all the elements in the semiconductor ecosystems. And we also learned that we have only a cluster of companies operating globally in this particular ecosystem. And after the COVID-19, we can see a huge amount of disruptions happening in this particular sector, especially triggered by geopolitical tensions, rising demand, lack of technology, lack of research and development, lack of enough of manufacturing of these chips in place, etc. So there is a space for India. If India is able to achieve all these missions, achieve all these initiatives properly, then definitely by 2028, we will have our semiconductor market value somewhere hitting around $80.3 billion. So let's wait and watch what is happening in this particular field of economy. So that's it for today. So thank you so much for watching, and if you have not subscribed to UPSC Warriors channel, please subscribe. And we have made a detailed analysis of the UPSC question papers this year happened recently. Do watch that also and stay tuned with us for more updates. Thank you so much.